Hi, I'm Rosa and I'm here to talk about books. And today I want to introduce you to this book called Brilliant Green, The Surprising History and Science of Plant Intelligence by Stefano Mancuso and Alessandra Viola. We may resent those we depend on because they don't make us feel completely free. In short, we are so dependent on plants that we do everything we can not to think about them. Perhaps we don't wish to remember that our very survival is linked to the plant world, because that makes us feel weak, hardly masters of the universe. In Brilliant Green, the authors introduce us to the idea that plants, rather than being passive and inanimate, are rather very active beings with lots of capabilities that humans tend to underestimate. Most people might now immediately point to the famous insectivorous plants, like this one for example, as a proof for this claim. But this book wants to go a step further and make us aware of basically the most boring plants around us in the background of our lives as complex and alive and animate beings. The book is divided into 5 chapters. In the first chapter, we are led on a tour through the history of plant science and how, since ancient philosophy, plants have been shoehorned into this category of beings that are radically different from animals and human beings. And not only radically different, but somehow less active, less alive. And the second chapter is called The Plant a Stranger. And here the authors give examples as to how exactly plants are so radically different from humans and animals, and how this very difference, this very strangeness, makes it so difficult for us as human beings with our anthropocentric, human-centered bias to recognize all the abilities that plants have. In chapter 3, we learn about the senses of plants. Everybody knows the 5 senses of us humans: sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. And here the authors show that plants, even though they do not have the corresponding organs like ears or eyes or mouths, they still manage to carry out the functions of these 5 senses. Additionally, they even have 15 other senses that have been discovered so far, like the ability to precisely measure the humidity of a soil, and also plants are able to sense electromagnetic fields. It's kind of like, birds that orient along the electromagnetic fields of the earth, with the big difference, of course, that we don't see plants in swarms flying over our heads, which would be pretty cool. The 4th chapter is all about plant communication and all the methods plants have to communicate, on the one hand with each other, plant-to-plant communication, and on the other hand with animals like insects, pollinators, whatever. And also how plants communicate inside themselves from one part of the plant to the other part of the plant. The 5th and final chapter, lastly, is all about the titular plant intelligence. Here the authors state why exactly the term plant intelligence, as directly corresponding to the way we talk about human or animal intelligence, should be used to talk about all these capabilities of plants. And aside from simply stating why they think the term plant intelligence makes sense, they also show how it can be useful for different fields aside from plant neurobiology to study the intelligence of plants. If it's not even 200 pages, Brilliant Green is a fast and enjoyable read. It's written in a very clear and straightforward style. You don't need any previous knowledge of botany to understand what's going on. For me, as somebody who has read quite a few things about plant intelligence before, it didn't give me so many new information, but this didn't lessen my enjoyment at all. I liked it as a compact summary, basically, of the core ideas and history of the study of plant intelligence. and you can quickly look up specific topics and then search the very useful commentated bibliography for the corresponding scientific publications. Let me just show you a page of the bibliography. I really like that the authors decided when compiling the bibliography to sometimes include the abstracts of the articles they cite. And especially for somebody who has never heard of plant intelligence before, I would pretty much consider this one the perfect introduction. As I said, it's very clearly written and straightforward, and it will leave you craving more books on botany. A minor criticism I have is that the book at times was quite repetitive and redundant. In general, I think in longer non-fiction books, it makes sense to remind the readers of its core questions or hypotheses every once in a while, but with a book that's really so short, and I personally read it in one sitting because I was so excited, and I really think in this case it is not necessary to be quite as repetitive. I think that some paragraphs could have been omitted to make the book even more fresh and crispy, even though that sounds like a salad. Aside from this, I completely enjoyed my reading experience, and I recommend this book to honestly everyone. I mean, plants are so cool, and you learn a lot of things about why plants are so cool, so you can tell all your friends about it.